So here's one of our 3 different vertebral spinal cord models. The other one's got the bones on it, and then there's one that's kind of just a plain colorless model. You are responsible for knowing all 3, so make sure you study these structures on those as well. You cannot see the meninges on this model. You can only see that on the model that has the vertebrae, so make sure you review that one too. But let's start looking at our spinal cord. So first thing I want to ask, are we looking at an anterior, like posterior spinal cord? Because remember, we're looking at from the top, or are we looking at a posterior anterior? Well, you haven't known because I haven't told you yet. But a really easy way to tell if you're looking at a posterior part of the spinal cord is to look for this bump. This bump is called the dorsal root ganglion. It is a collection of cell bodies that is going to be very obvious to see, and so it's going to be a little group. As you can guess by its name, dorsal root ganglion, that this is the dorsal root or the posterior root. Either word is acceptable. Normally it's called the dorsal root ganglion, but I've seen books do both, and again, posterior and dorsal are used interchangeably. The more common of the two, though, is dorsal root ganglion. And then, of course, this is the dorsal root, which means that this is the anterior or ventral root. Again, either word is acceptable for you to use. You have them on both sides, and you've got on this side the dorsal root ganglion with the dorsal root, and then the anterior root. And these are going to form your spinal nerves. So these will exit your spine through the intervertebral foramen, those holes we were talking about during the bones. So now that we know that this is our anterior side and this is our posterior side, the rest of the naming conventions come really easy. So the first thing we're going to look at is called the anterior median fissure, and then the posterior median sulcus. So that's going to be the anterior median fissure is this little gap, and then the posterior median sulcus with the central canal, as you can guess, right where I can stick my little pointer, right in the middle. So that is the central canal. So now that we know that these are anterior and posterior, we can name these 3 structures, and we can name these 3 structures. Notice that, by the way, the gray matter's on the inside, and on the outside it's white. In the brain it's reversed. It's just not shown on our model. So make sure that you know for test day, both lecture and lab, that the gray matter is going to be on the outside for the brain, and then it's going to have white matter on the inside, but in the spinal cord it's reversed. So as far as these structures here, we call these funiculi. I did Google the etymology, which is the word breakdown, to see if that was helpful at all. Funiculus just means rope, and these are just ropes of nerves. So I don't think that's really as helpful. It's just one of those terms you're just going to have to learn, unfortunately. But what's really nice is that the naming convention is anterior, lateral, and posterior funiculus. So really, as long as you know your orientation terms, like I said, first week of anatomy, the most important terms you can learn are the directional terms. I wasn't kidding, because really the new word you have to learn for this week is funiculus if you understand anterior, lateral, and posterior. And guess what? For the horns of the gray matter, they're named the exact same way. Anterior horn, lateral horn, and posterior horn. So this is something I emphasize a lot. It is not too late to start learning some of these terms, but like I said, they're not going away, and they're really nifty for naming things because you just learned 6 structures in like 2 seconds just by knowing anterior, lateral, and posterior. And then now you learn these 3 as well. So those are the structures you can pretty much see on this model. You'll need to use the other models to go over the meninges, and then also to test yourself on the blank white model. So just make sure you go over those as well, but I will include some pictures in the slideshow for you to review outside of lab.